In the previous video, you just learnt about the various territorial terms of the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles was a peace treaty between the Allied powers and Germany. Now, Germany had lost the First World War, and therefore the terms imposed upon it were considered to be unfair and unjust by the German public. While looking at the territorial losses endured by Germany, he found out that it had to give away almost 13% of its own European territories. Now, that makes up for the territorial terms. But that still does not give us the full picture of exactly how unfair the terms of the treaty perhaps were. For that, let's start looking at the other subdivision of the various terms. Let's now look at the various economic and financial terms of the treaty, or what one may call the war reparations. Now, as if the territorial losses had not stripped Germany of its resources enough, Germany had to pay an enormous amount, accounting to around $33 billion, which happened to make up about 83% of Germany's GDP at that time. GDP is a parameter to properly understand a country's economic capacity. Now, having to pay some amount of money, which is accounting to about 83% of your economic capacity, gives us a fair idea as to what will happen to Germany when it will start to pay this amount of money. Now, this particular picture is a satirical representation of how insane and enormous the amount of this reparation was. As you can see, Germany right over here is being burdened by this huge bag of money which says reparations amounting to $33 billion, and it shows that how increasingly impossible it was for Germany to pay this amount of money. But now Germany happens to be a resource-rich country, right? We have read enough in geography as to how Germany is a storehouse of multiple forms of resources. But after the First World War, Germany's resources itself were being taken away, not only as war reparations, but from the very lands these resources were found. So if you remember, Germany had to hand over the resource-rich Saar Basin, which is right over here, to France for a period of 15 years, which means that for 15 years, Germany lost all its rights to collect or to extract the resources from this region. How exactly will Germany pay back the money if it doesn't have the resources? But certainly Saar Basin must not be the only storehouse of resources, right? Well, it was not only the Saar. If you remember the various territorial losses that Germany had to endure, every single region was strategically and resourcefully important to Germany. So if we consider all the territories which Germany lost, it would account for a loss of 75% of all of Germany's iron deposits, 26% of all of Germany's coal deposits. Two of the most important resources one needs to build a nation and to build a nation's wealth specifically. And all this was handed over to France, Poland, Denmark and Lithuania. So once Germany is losing the control or the rights over these resources, it could no longer extract them anymore. As if that was not enough, Germany's trade was also disrupted. To start off, no country was willing to trade with Germany. But to add on to this, the treaty also made sure that Germany would have to hand over the possession of German merchant ships to the Allied nations. So all the particular ships, the cargo ships and the supply ships which were conducting German trade, all had to be handed over to the Allied nations. Now in this context you might ask, with no resources, with no trade, and with an already devastated economy, not to think of all the devastation and the destruction of property that Germany had to endure during the war, how exactly was it supposed to pay $33 billion worth of war indemnity of that time? Well, the same question also loomed over the German public. The German government, in order to pay this particular indemnity back, heavily took loans from the market. Having not been able to pay these loans back, Germany started to devalue its currency, or to make its currency have a lesser purchasing capacity.
But the government did that at such an exponential rate that Germany eventually had to face inflation.
And not just any form of inflation, Germany had to face hyperinflation, or a situation where the German currency lost all its value. And in these hyperinflationary conditions, we see a situation arising where $1, or the $1 which is the US currency, was equivalent to 100,000 German marks. So in this picture you can see that this child is holding a dollar note in his hand and then pointing to a mountain load of money.
So this particular cash held by him
Is equivalent of all this currency, which is German mark. So as you can understand, the economy of Germany was absolutely devastated. Now you would be surprised to find out that it was only in the year 2010, which is quite recent if you think about it, was Germany able to pay off this particular war debt dating back to the First World War. So it took Germany 92 years to pay off a war debt. And you can imagine what 92 years worth of war debt can do to a country. Needless to say, for the next 20 years after the First World War, German economy was perhaps the most heavily hit economies of the entire European continent. And this condition of German economy impacted the people of Germany the most. So just quickly recapping the financial and the economic terms of the treaty, we see that Germany had to face the enormous war indemnity of $33 billion. Now it also lost its rich resourceful regions like Saar to France and other similar regions, which was the economic powerhouse of Germany. Now these it lost to France, Poland, Denmark and Lithuania. Now at the same time, Germany also had to hand over its merchant ships which were conducting trade for Germany. So therefore we see Germany had a lot of money to pay but no way to pay it, which led to inflationary conditions where 100,000 German marks was equivalent to $1, and it took Germany about 92 years to pay off her war debt. Now let us look at the various military terms of the treaty. So you see,
simply stripping Germany of its territories and destroying its economy is never enough.
the real pride of Germany lies in its military capability. So the Allied nations very well knew of this particular militaristic pride which Germany had. The once mighty Prussian army, which used to strike fear into the hearts of any European soldier, now got their hands tied. So you see, according to the treaty, Germany had to reduce its armed forces, not by 1% or 5%, by a whooping 18%. So whereas before the war and during the war, Germany had the armed capacity of 6 million soldiers, Germany could now only maintain a mere 100,000 men as its soldiers. That number is barely enough to even look after the borders of a country, that to the size of Germany. So we now see that the once mighty and proud German army is now being reduced to the level of a security force. And this was done so that Germany never has the ambition or the confidence to think of invading Europe ever again. So can you answer this question? How many soldiers could Germany keep in its army as per the Treaty of Versailles? Could Germany keep 1,000 soldiers? Could it keep 25,000 soldiers? Could it keep 100,000 soldiers? Or could it keep 6 million soldiers? The correct answer is that Germany could only keep 100,000 soldiers as per the Treaty of Versailles. Now the army was not the only thing that had its military strength reduced. Germany, if you remember, used to employ its submarine blockading strategy, which was a menacing strength which Germany had against the Allied nations, especially that of Britain and its navy. So when Germany lost the war, Britain made sure that Germany could never dare to attempt that again. And therefore, Germany had to get rid of its submarines, the U-boats which Germany used to rely so heavily upon. And not just submarines, Germany had to also get rid of any heavy artillery, such as cannons, and also military aircrafts as well. So in this picture you see, after the treaty, how the German U-boats are being scrapped or they're being sold for their metal alone, as they could no longer be used as part of a German navy. Germany also had to disband their entire air force. So it's not like it only had to give away its military aircrafts. Its entire air force as a division of the military strength had to be now disbanded. So that's one more loss that Germany had to face. But the most devastating military term that Germany had to endure was that it was forced to demilitarize the Rhineland region, which is right over here. Now the Rhineland region is a strategic territory which lies right between Germany and France. Now this region was extremely important for Germany, as it was through this region was it able to enter Belgium and then into France
During
its unsuccessful invasion of France. The Allied nations wanted to avoid any such situation and therefore made Germany demilitarize the one region through which it could access France. By demilitarization, I mean that the German soldiers could no longer enter this particular region, even though it still technically belonged to Germany. This was a great loss for Germany, as it meant that even its strategic stronghold over its border territories was no longer its own authority. Not only the Rhineland region itself, the Allies also were able to capture the Rhine Valley. Now the Rhine Valley happens to be those territories which encircle the Rhineland region. Now let us quickly recap all the military terms of the treaty. Germany could only keep 100,000 soldiers in its army. Its navy could only keep 6 battleships and no submarines or U-boats, and its entire air force was disbanded. Germany also had to demilitarize the strategic Rhineland region which it had with France, which meant that it could no longer send its troops to this particular region. So therefore, we then saw the military terms of the Treaty of Versailles as well. Now we need to understand that apart from these, there were a couple of other terms which made the Treaty of Versailles a unique case study. That we will be looking at in the next video.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers, or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.